In today's video, I want to take a look at some Toronto Maple Leaf trade rumors. We're going to look at some information from The Athletic in the kind of a wish list for who is the most likely players the Leafs are going to target at the trade deadline. We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we're going to take a look at some information from The Athletic from two writers in James Myrtle and Jonas Siegel, looking at basically their own wish list for what they feel the Maple Leafs are going to be doing here ahead of the NHL trade deadline. We know Kyle Dubas has been pretty clear and outspoken that he definitely wants to go after a forward, ideally a top six forward, and there's a lot of speculation they may as well try to add another defenseman on the back end if they can make the financial side of things work. Of course, that's going to be the really difficult and tricky part here, is there's not a lot of teams, and the Leafs are certainly lumped into that. There's not much wiggle room with the salary cap, so they have to have some money going out. The teams are going to possibly have to retain salary in the players coming in that they're working with, and there could even have to be a third team involved as well. It's going to be complex, but we know that the Leafs are likely going to be doing everything they can to get a little bit deeper ahead of the playoffs. I know Dubas has made it clear he wants to go all in. They feel this is a good opportunity for them, given the Canadian division, that if they can win that division in the playoffs, and they can go all the way to the Final Four and the semifinals here and have a real legitimate shot at a Stanley Cup. This might be their best opportunity and be able to avoid a lot of the other teams that they've run into issues with here in the last number of years since they've been playoff contenders again under this current regime here. So let's take a look at each of these writers' list, and I'll just give you my thoughts and opinions on what I think is going to happen. Now, one thing that a lot of fans are kind of calling for is Freddie Andersen to be moved on from. I don't see that happening. I mean, as much as I understand the frustration with his performance as of late, his stats have not been good. I don't think Freddie Andersen has really lived up to the bill here this season. The last couple of years, he's been very inconsistent. Some people have said that he's been really overworked the last few years, and they feel it does really run him down, and maybe that's right. I'm not sure exactly what the reasons are, but the fact of the matter is that he's been not a great goaltender. He's been below average, and they need better goaltending in the playoffs if they're going to have any shot at going deep. But I do think there's a better opportunity. Maybe a guy like Jack Campbell steps up, gets hot, and maybe they give him more of the net than Andersen. But getting Andersen traded for a guy who's going to do a better job right now is probably going to be pretty difficult. I think there's a good chance Freddie Andersen leaves via free agency in the offseason, and they determine what their next course of action is for a starting goaltender at that point in time. But for right now, I think they're likely going to stick with goaltending and try to add in the forward and D group. Now, here's the top five for each writer, and we'll go into each one. James Myrtle of The Athletic has written here his top forward that he feels the Leafs should go after is Rakell, Granlund of the Nashville Predators. He also lists Kyle Palmieri at number 2, Tanner Pearson at number 3, Bobby Ryan at number 4, and Eric Staal at number 5. Now, to be honest, I think Granlund probably would be a good fit. He can go between the second and third lines. A pretty versatile forward, had some good offensive outputs in the past. And to be honest, if they're going to add on the blue line, I think ideally the D-men they have their sights set on would be Predators defenseman Mattias Ekholm, who still has a year left on his contract. And really, that would really solidify them on the back end, give them another solid defensive style defenseman. Might complicate things for the expansion draft, and it might complicate things for next season or next offseason. But you know what? They're going to deal with that when the time comes. For right now, they're focused on trying to win a Stanley Cup. And if that opportunity exists and they could swing a deal with Nashville for Granlund and Ekholm, then I think that's probably their most likely best case scenario amongst all the players that are out there, where they could actually satisfy both positions here. I mean, what's it going to take to get that deal done? You're looking at probably Alex Kerfoot being the main roster player going out. It could involve a defenseman. If a defenseman comes off the roster, it'll likely be Dermott, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a prospect defenseman, maybe a guy like Liljegren or Sandin, probably Liljegren being the preferred one. That's assuming that Nashville insists on a forward, but there was talk that they might even be willing to throw in their first round pick in either 2021 or 22, or possibly even a top prospect like a Rodion Namirov, or maybe a Nick Robertson. I think Robertson's probably less likely that they'd want to, but depending on the deal and how good they feel it makes them this year, I do think it's a possibility, at least, that they would consider that kind of trade. They also have some prospect goalies in the system as well that they could consider moving on from, between Scott or Wall. I mean, they both had pretty solid careers when they were younger, just a matter of developing and to seeing what they would be at the pro level here. So some more interesting guys to kind of consider there. Now, looking at the rest of this list, though, Kyle Palmieri is not a guarantee that he's going to be traded. The Devils are interested, apparently, in extending him. They're having negotiations. I do think there's a pretty decent chance, maybe as 50-50 right now, maybe a little better, that he does get moved, but there's going to be plenty of other teams in the mix there as well. I do agree he'd be a good fit, but I'm not sure that that's going to be as easy a deal to swing. You had Tanner Pearson in Vancouver, who recently was injured. He's going to be out for a month, which puts it past the deadline. So maybe to a degree, he'd be a decent fit. It'd be a rental, which would be okay as well for the offseason next year. But I'm not really sure he'd be the best fit, and I think it's a risky deal considering you wouldn't even be able to see him in action until afterwards. But because he's playing in Vancouver, if the Canucks fall out of contention here and they decided to move him, then obviously that would be able to be worked with to avoid any kind of isolation period as well, which gets him into their lineup a little bit sooner. When it comes to Bobby Ryan and Eric Stahl, to be honest, I don't think Eric Stahl, by the sounds of things, wants to go to a Canadian team due to the isolation fact. I mean, a guy at his age sounds like he's more likely to go back to Carolina. I do think he'd be a good fit for the Leafs, don't get me wrong, but he's not going to give you that top 6 forward position. I think he'd be more of a third-line player. Same with Bobby Ryan. I mean, Bobby's having a bit of a comeback season, got off to a hot start, but again, went cold for a long stretch. Like, that's the way he's been for the last number of years. As much as I do think he could possibly bring back playoff Bobby Ryan that we saw in 2017 with the Senators, but I don't know. I'm not sure that Bobby would really be the best fit either. So based on the list here that Myrtle's made up, I personally think Granlund is the best fit. Kyle Palmieri would be a great option too. I just think it might be a little bit more expensive and difficult to get the deal done. Now, taking a look at the other Leaf writer here, Jonas Siegel, he's got a pretty interesting list here as well. And I do think his list to me is a little bit more realistic. He actually has LA Kings forward Alex Iafallo at the top. He also has Taylor Hall, Philip Forsberg, Rakell, and Matt Nieto on his top 5. So it's certainly a very different looking list. Now, Iafallo is a bit of a wild card here. I mean, if the Kings decide to want to sign him, and I do believe that they're interested in doing so, then he may not be available anyways, but he would be a good forward who could come in and be a similar type of player to Zach Hyman, so he could go between your second and third lines, just like Hyman can do. They can be interchangeable parts, and it would kind of balance out that middle 6 of the lineup, and he can contribute in a variety of ways. The price tag probably wouldn't be quite so bad, which would be good in that sense as well. And, obviously, Iafallo is another player who could be used as a rental. So to me, Iafallo would be a great option, but at this point, it's a little bit less likely that he's going to be available. Taylor Hall, I really don't know what to think of Taylor Hall, to be completely honest. He's not having a good season, but of course, you could chuck that up to everything that's going on in Buffalo. But then you look at what he did in Arizona, and at the end of things in New Jersey, like, it seems to follow him around. I'd be a little leery of what I call the Taylor Hall curse to myself. It just seems like he's never really been able to have team success wherever he's been, and he's been a common denominator here. Based on the fact he's making $8 million, the Sabres would have to eat 50% of that, and they'd have to have probably 2 things off the roster going out to bring him in. I just don't know that he's really your best fit. Yes, he's a proven, past top 6 scorer, Hart Trophy winner. Not all bad by any means. Like, he could be the right guy. I just would be a little bit leery given his past, and just seems like all the teams he seems to be on just don't seem to do well. So that itself to me is a little bit of a turnoff. Now, of course, Philip Forsberg would be an awesome pickup. I'm just not sure that they're going to be able to swing that. I mean, obviously, Nashville is going to have to be blown away with an offer to consider moving Forsberg. I do think there's a couple of guys outside of your pending unrestricted free agents on the Preds that could be moved. I mean, Ekholm is most likely with contract term to be traded. But as far as, Forsberg or Arvidsson or any of those guys, the only way it's getting done is you're going to have to pay up a lot. And I'm just not sure the Leafs are going to want to do that. And obviously, they would be complicated cap-wise on the long haul here as well. So I'm not sure exactly what they'd have to give up. I think he'd be a great fit. If they could pull off Philip Forsberg and Ekholm from Nashville, that would be awesome. I just don't think that the price tag is going to be realistic for them to be able to do that. Then you have Rakell and Matt Nieto, and of course, Rakell comes with a little bit of term as well. His contract hits not so bad, just under $3.9 million. Rakell, I do think, could be a good fit. I know there's been some talk that the price tag from the Ducks is going to be extremely high, and other teams have kind of started negotiations with them and backed off because of the asking price. And I could see that maybe being an issue, but I'm not sure that the Ducks are really going to get what they're looking for. I think their price tag might have to come down a bit closer to the deadline if they really want to consider trading Rakell. And I'm not convinced 100% that they do, but it makes a lot of sense for them to move out a couple veteran players there that they can and get some decent returns, because they're clearly needing to go in a different direction to give more opportunity to the future, and that's their young players like Siegel and Drysdale and Sam Steele and Max Jones, all the younger players in their lineup there that are ready to take on a bigger step here and take a big step in the lineup. But obviously Rakell, I do think, could be a good fit for the Leafs. And then Matt Nieto, I have nothing against Matt Nieto. I think he'd be an okay pickup. He would help the bottom six, maybe help the penalty kill, but I'm not really sure that he's going to fit what Dubas is looking for, given that it's been more like a scoring top six winger or a middle six winger that they're ideally looking at. So I'm not really sure that's a great fit. So personally, and amongst all the players that have been linked to the Leafs, I still think their best option is Ekholm and Granlund from Nashville being your preferred choice, or Alex Iafallo here from the Los Angeles Kings. If they go the route of Iafallo, then it's going to depend on going to another team for a defenseman, and maybe they have to look more like a David Savard type in Columbus. Then obviously that would be two different deals that might prove to be too difficult to pull off. It's hard to say. So personally, I think if I'm Kyle Dubas, I'm working with David Poile and trying to get that deal done. It gets me a solid defenseman and a solid rental forward, and that makes them pretty deep going forward here. Like I said, I don't see a situation where the Leafs are going to bring in another goaltender. Even a report on Sportsnet from Chris Johnston today even indicated that as much as the fans would love to see a new starting goaltender, he does not see a situation where Dubas trades Anderson before the deadline and gets another goalie in here. I mean, the other goalie, whatever deal they would do, would almost certainly have to come from an American team, put them in quarantine for 2 weeks. It'd be difficult to pull off, not only from a cap perspective, but from an isolation perspective as well. And I just don't really see how it could work. So I think they're going to have to stick with Freddie and Campbell and ride this out and see just how far they can take them. Obviously, their playoff success will be determined greatly by how well of a performance they get between the pipes. So amongst all these options here that the Athletics talking about for options here for the Leafs, who do you feel is the best choice? Give me your mock trades. Let me know what's realistic down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.